Everyone up here, my screen share right here.
Good evening. How's everybody?
Doing great. How about you?
I am just so excited to be here. I've been waiting all day. Better turn this phone down. Somebody will call me in just a minute here. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm gonna go ahead and start my share. It's a couple minutes before time to start, but we can do some of our housekeeping stuff. So let me share my screen. Righty, and folks can join in. Let's see what we got here. I'll get to her in a few minutes. All right, so case study, here are those things. All right. I put drop boxes in. I didn't put them in but a few minutes before class, and already got one in it. But and I intentionally didn't put them in until this evening for a reason. All right, at the end of each case study, you need to come back and you got to put your group's PowerPoint in. Now, everybody's got to put a copy in. Let me say that again. Everybody has got to put a copy in. There is no group putting it in. Everybody's got to put a copy in. Now, I would wait until after presentation of my case study to put my copy of my PowerPoint in case you have to go back and make corrections. Now, if you make some big snafu or faux pas during your presentation, you get it wrong and you upload it and it's still wrong, you'll get graded accordingly. The important part here is that if you got it wrong, I can live with that, but I can't live with you getting it wrong and not going back and fixing it. And so I believe I'd wait until after I presented before I put mine in. Now, the other thing is, do not send me a personal reflection of the case until after you have presented your case study. Then I want you to reflect back on the process. Now, you can tell me anything you learned from the case study. You can tell me anything about how your group worked or what you took away from the night that we had the presentation. You can tell me any of that, but you can't tell me before we actually go through the process of presenting the studies. So that's why I didn't put them in until a few minutes ago, because I always get this people just I sometimes will get one from 3 or 4 case studies down the road, and they're like, wait a minute, we hadn't even gone over that yet. I know that you're all overachievers and want to get done, but administrators reflect on their practice. That's what this is about. If you got your PowerPoint and it's not good and it's not right and you're not proud of it, then you need to fix it before you submit it. And you need to reflect back after the case study night. Sometimes we get into heated arguments and debates and all that on case study night. You need to reflect back on that. Or you need to think back, in the end about everybody's role. You can tell me. Now, these drop boxes are private. Nobody reads them but me. So if you want to tell me that, Josh was terrible, Jasmine was wonderful, but Josh was terrible, that's good for me to know. So that's where you put these. So at the end of the evening tonight, if you think your PowerPoint is, hits the strong points of the case, then drop it in the PowerPoint box. And then, now your reflection the next question I always get is, how long should my reflection be? No more than a half a page. If it's just a couple sentences, that's fine with me too. I want your thoughts. I want you to reflect back on the case and the process of putting your case together. Remember, this is another level. Doing a video peer review is, sharing information is one level. Collaborating to create a project is the next level on using technology appropriately as school administrators. And how did it go? Somebody did, we had a meeting, somebody didn't show. Well, that's not appropriate. Now, and I know how that goes today. At 3 o'clock today, this is every day this week, I've got a 3 o'clock meeting. Today was Department of Public Instruction, 3 o'clock meeting, went from 3 to 4:30. I've had root canals that I enjoyed more than that 90 minutes with them today, but that was my responsibility to show up and have my part done. That's just the way life is, folks. You got to show up. Showing up's 90% of life. Just showing up prepared, sober, and clean clothes. You know, I'll tell you this, as I was told many years ago, very rarely will you be the smartest person in the meeting, but you can always, that's out of your control, but you can always be the most prepared because that is in your control. Show up prepared, being where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's a big part of collaboration, especially virtually. That's why it's another level on up the chain. You know, if you show up, if we assign our parts, we come back together. Have you done your part? That's always the issue in a virtual collaborative environment. Has everybody done their part? Or did they just, we'll when I get to the meeting, I'll start? No. Did you have what you were supposed to be done? Now, as I told you, I had a virtual meeting today with DPI, with the work group. Now, we will meet again on the 15th of February. We're doing bi-monthly meetings now, twice a month. Now, I have a homework assignment that's due by the 13th before the meeting on the 15th. It doesn't do any good to show up at the meeting and then try to do your homework. And so just in case, you know, so that they can go through all of our stuff and have it sorted on the day we meet again, our deadline is 2 days before. Even in a professional environment, you have homework assignments, you have responsibilities. So I better have mine done before the 13th, by the 13th, so that when we meet again on the 15th, it can't be, well, Dale, what did you got? Well, I thought I'd do it while we was, you know, sitting here. No, that's not the way this works. So those are the kinds of things, the feedback that I need. All right, I'm moving on quickly here with our time. I don't want to take a lot of our time tonight because presentations take a while. All right, so that's our case studies. Peer reviewing. It doesn't do any good to peer review when somebody's already turned their final one in that's been edited. So make sure that you're quick on the peer reviews. I just want to remind you of that. Some things that caught my eye this week. I think I mentioned these last week, but I'm going to cover these again quickly under discussion board 3. I like Jasmine. She talked about 2 different cases. One's misfeasance. You know, wrong thing was done, but not intentionally. One's malfeasance. You know, you slap a kid, you know, that's intentional. That's malfeasance. As I said, you'll have to show that you provided training for teachers not to do that. Liz talked about dividing duties. Kristen, large areas, 1 to 45. Again, cafeteria, playground, 1 to 45. Arbitrary and capricious, you know, punishing some kids, not others. Capricious, giving too much punishment. That was Tanya. Tremaine talked about small things can cost you millions. Josh, I like what Josh said, that fear, which is not a bad thing, makes people follow the book, go by the book. That's what law and policy is. Your job as a school administrator is to follow law and policy. Now, I've told you when we do interviewing, you'll be asked somewhere in the interviewing process if there was a law or a policy in a district that you didn't agree with, would you still enforce it? And the answer, of course, is yes. I will enforce that because that's what you paid me to do. You didn't pay me to think. You paid me to follow the rules. That's a good catch by Josh. I like what Caroline said on discipline, especially PBIS. Slow down and get it right. PBIS makes you slow down and be intentional. And we'll talk about our next discussion board 4. I mean, you know, we need to be working toward restorative justice. We need to make sure that kids get due process in both substantial, substantive and procedural. Substances is what does due process say kids are owed. Procedure is, did you follow that substance? Did you do what you were supposed to do? And you got to be slow, intentional, thorough, get witness statements, let the kid, present the charges, all the things that you have to do. And so PBIS does help with that. It does slow you down and make you more intentional. Carolina talked about 1 to 45, assigning teachers that to be on the playground. That's of no value as a principal if you don't go out and make sure that they're there. If on a regular basis, the people that you've assigned to be there don't show up for their supervision, you will be liable. in court. Just because you can't go to court and say, well, I told them to go. Did you go and check? No. Do you teach school? No. What's your job? To supervise the ones that do. Did you go supervise them? No, I didn't. Won't go well for you. That's, you had a duty to act and didn't. That would be nonfeasance. They'll get you on negligence. That's just like if you put a sign up in the faculty lounge for after school activities and then don't see that anybody of those people show up. You assign people. And if they don't come, there has to be a follow through on people who don't do their duties during the day or their supervision during the after school hours. That's your responsibility. Again, you don't teach school. Your job is to supervise. You work with adults. Teachers work with kids. You don't work with kids. You work with adults. Amy talked about the proper way to supervise. You can't be on your telephone, and they can track your phone records. If you're on the phone not paying attention, some kid gets hurt. That will not go well for you. Tommy talked about policy is good. It keeps you. I like Emmy pointed out in loco parentis in place of the parent. That is the standard of care that you're to provide students. In her scenario, the video showed the proper response from the teacher. Adrian talked about an intentional tort, which is malpractice. That's what an intentional tort is. A tort is a liability, a negligence. An intentional is you intended to harm. I like Kizzy pointed out that you need a distribution plan, how you're going to provide the kids for when the teacher's out, you don't have a sub, that should be done beforehand. Again, discussion board 4, Tommy talked about restorative justice. I like that Jeff talked with his administration. That's a good thing. About how to do discipline. Liz did a good job on how she, on task 1, on how she differentiated or outlined the school improvement team's role in the school budget. I like Adam pointed out task 1, safe, respectful, polite. Tamala on her task 3, I like that her master schedule revision was to eliminate overcrowding on the playground and get back within that 1 to 45. That was a good lick. I like that Randy initiated a discussion about the budget with his principal. That's what you're supposed to do. I liked Wanda pointed out that there are mitigating factors when you're doing discipline that should be brought into play. And Carolina talked about due process hearings. Due process hearings happen at the district level, and then that decision can be appealed to the superintendent, and that decision can be appealed to the board before it goes to court. Due process hearings don't start in court. They originate in the school district. All right, so I think that's everything that I saw in my notes this week. Be careful. Please remember, please remember that OMA Task 3 has 2 prompts. I had a couple miss that this week. They just saw prompt 1 and answered it. Prompt 2 is you got to actually show us a graphic of your schedule. Okay. All right. Anybody have anything else before we get started? Who was that was sharing their screen with their presentation on it to start with? Go now. Hit it. All right.
All right. We are Team 7, and this is case study 1. We include the members of Tamala, Kizzy, Melody, and Joshua.
Leave it on the screen there for 1 more second for me.
Yes, sir.
I couldn't find my pen. I'm sorry. I had stuck it in the wrong pocket. All right. Go right ahead. Thank you.
So what I think in our discussions and our work preparing for this, initially we wanted to just strip down to what facts are actually relevant to this case, because there's a lot of superficial stuff all the way from, the principal having coffee and, losing his appetite for his coffee all the way through. Even the athletic stuff seemed very
immaterial.
Like it doesn't matter at all in this process. So we stripped it down and just came up with these three main things as our facts here. So Bobby Henson cheated. The assignment accounted for greater than 50% of the course grade, and then Bobby will fail the course due to the failing assignment grade. So just stripping it all the way down, those three things are the biggest factors that we needed to address as an administrator in this situation.
All right, so for process, that's the section I'll be taking over. It says, Bobby should have had the opportunity to share his side of the story, the opportunity to witness, to have a witness present during the cheating investigation, and the opportunity to restore his academic status after the consequence. So basically give him a consequence that's reasonable, like, hey, okay, well, you did this. You can, how about you resubmit the paper, or basically just not, fail him. And with the paper, I feel like I think it weighed too much. It shouldn't have been.
Was it legal to weight it that much?
No, sir.
No. Who sets the grading policy in North and South Carolina? The State Board of Education, right? And they have parameters, and then your local adopts inside of that. And so, does North or South Carolina, doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter whether we count this a homework assignment or an out of class assignment in aggregate. That means for the whole year, they can only count 10%. Now, that is in your handbook, your district approved grading policy that comes from that state board policy is in your handbook. What one day every year are you supposed to that be covered with administrators? Are you supposed to cover that with teachers? That one required work day in August, right? Aren't you supposed to go through the handbook from front to back? That is a legal requirement, and it includes the district's grading policy. Excellent, excellent. Now, I like what Kizzy said. Kizzy, you're in CMS. You at JM Alexander?
Yes, sir.
I'm just up the road from you. One of my favorite, kind of like my oldest daughter, Angela Richardson, was principal there a while back. I trained her when she was a young assistant principal in Charlotte Meck. Love Angie. But the reason I pointed that out, does your district have a code of conduct?
Yes.
All right. What does it say the penalty for cheating is? You said we should find something alternative. Does it say that it is an academic issue, or does it say it's a disciplinary issue?
I think it'll probably be an academic issue, not disciplinary.
No, it's disciplinary.
Oh.
According to CMS Code of Conduct, you can't punish a kid academically for cheating.
Oh, well, no, not give them a bad grade. Well, that's what the lady was
right.
going to do. That's what the teacher was going to do. She can't give them a bad grade. That's why I said let him redo the paper.
Exactly.
And follow up with consequences like make parent contact. Because the parent did sign and acknowledge the code of conduct or the handbook at the beginning of the school year. So, and he's it as well. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So most districts have categorized cheating as a disciplinary incident, not an academic. So you can't penalize them. What's it called when you punish them discipline and academics? That's called double jeopardy. Can't punish a person twice for the same crime in English common law, which is United States of America. So if you give him in-school suspension and reduce his grade, that's double jeopardy. CMS says you can only do one thing, and most of you's district code of conducts say one thing, that this is a disciplinary incident, and it should be handled as should. We can't penalize their grade. So the teacher has double jeopardy this kid, and she has done capricious, way more punishment, and she has broken state law and local board policy on the grading scale. She's 3 for 3 now. She's 3 for 3. So excellent. Continue on.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna go to the next slide. All right, so procedural requires that the policies, rules, and regulations are applied in a fair manner. The teacher, she handled the investigation. She handled it solely by herself. No one else was involved. which I don't think that's a positive. The teacher
No,
gave
it's not. That's against the rules. You can't be judge and jury, can you? You have to write, what's it called when you write something down and send it to the office? What's that thing called?
a referral.
A referral. You have to do a referral. That's part of due process, isn't it? That the same person that caught you can't be the one that collects evidence on you. That's part of what we call substantive due process. That's the substance. And then procedural is, did you follow that? Well, obviously not. She didn't write a referral on him for cheating, did she? She acted as judge, jury, and executioner. That certainly is not due process. That's exactly right. She handled the investigation. Teachers are not to handle investigations, period. They are to write a referral. That's why we have that process, because that is chief among the rules for due process, is that the teacher can't be the one that conducts the investigation.
Okay, it also, I said the punishment did not fit the crime. It wasn't a reasonable punishment. By doing so, I feel like she was misusing her power. The teacher didn't give Bobby the opportunity to correct his actions. Like I said, I wanted him to be able to redo his assignment. Once he, I don't think he didn't even probably get to tell his side of the story. In the case study, it just said, explained his situation. It didn't say that he verbally told her what his situation was. I feel like when you're an educator, you have to have a sense of nurturing and just be human. Everyone is human, have grace, so to say. The teacher's grading policy was not accurate according to the state law. The weighted assignment, as you stated, it cannot be heavier than 10% for the entire year. Dr. Lim, you just said that?
That is correct.
Yeah, so
whether you count it as homework or an out of class assignment, and you could debate, there's no need to debate it because they both carry the same weight, 10% aggregate for the year.
Yeah, so the weighted assignment, as you stated, it can't carry that much. I said this, well, that's it, that's closing. Pretty much, this is an example like Frontier Justice, like basically she had the punishment was too big and she made her own laws and rules and regulations and it didn't fit. And she wanted the principal to back her up. And it wasn't, they can't back her up when she's doing wrong.
That is correct. Again, you remember when your mama said, if your friend jumped off the roof, would you jump off too? The answer is no, because you want to sacrifice your career in your home, and that doesn't mean that I'm obligated to go down on that sinking ship with you, to mix metaphors here. That's the notion here. And you can't be one of those inauthentic people that say, well, I'll support her in public, but privately I'll tell her not to do that again. No. You must be authentic. You're the same behind closed doors as you out in public, folks. That's the fastest way to get yourself out of a job where nobody will ever hire you, is being inauthentic. You got to get people to, what's the first tenet of leadership is followership. People don't have to love you or like everything that you do, but they have to know that you're authentic, that you will treat them all equitably, and that you will be the same Monday as you are Wednesday, as you are Friday, and that you will be the same behind closed doors as you are open doors. You must be truly authentic as a leader, and in order for people to follow you.
I have the next slides of comparing arbitrary and capricious standards. Arbitrary standard is a decision or standard applied to a situation based on an individual's discretion rather than the fair application of a rule or law. As we've discussed, the teacher's grading policy was based on her discretion rather than the district policy. She was making her own grading policy, and the policy leads to the failure of the student due to one assignment, which we know is against policy. Capricious standard is a decision or standard that is the product of a sudden, impulsive, and seemingly unmotivated behavior. And the teacher's decision to allow one grade to result in a failure All that student can be seen as capricious in nature. It was on a whim. She went rogue. She made her own policy. It was her way. In her classroom, it was going to be her way and what she thought instead of following policy. So that made the situation capricious.
And again, when you go to court, part of what will determine the capricious standard is the reasonable person standard. Would a reasonable person agree that failing a kid for a whole year was a reasonable punishment for turning in his brother's homework paper? Well, no. No more than if me and Josh are out back smoking and Melody shot me and sent him back to the room. Smoking's bad, but that seems like an awfully excessive punishment for smoking. This is that equivalent is the notion here. Now, go back one slide. I want to point something out. I'm going to change hats from principal now to supervisor or principal. One of my least favorite jobs of all time in the central office. I can't tell you the number of principals that I had that got in trouble, not only with the district, but more to the point with the law, because they used that word discretion. They thought because they were the principal that they had the ultimate discretion to do anything that they wanted to do. And I would have to remind them, nobody can give you permission to break the law. Nobody can give you the right to waive due process. Nobody can give you permission to use your discretion to punish one kid at one level and not punish another kid at another level that did the same thing. Nobody can give you permission to put a kid out of school for 10 days when, for some minor infraction. You are not king. You are subject to the laws of the land. You fall under these conduct rules, and not only law and policy, but ethical concern as well. Was this an ethical thing to do? And that's why we always put these cases through the ethical lens, because your supervisor in the central office, whether it's your area superintendent or assistant superintendent, your supervisor is going to hold you to those standards. Did you follow law? Did you follow policy? Did you follow the ethical paradigms? Because sometimes, even though you might not have broken a law or a policy, the optics, the ethical piece of it looks really, really bad. Really, really bad. Did you do what you were supposed to do? Now, I'm unfortunately, and it hurts my heart to say this, I put it in the shell today under last week, under liability. We'll get to that when, I think we'll talk about it. The young student that was beat down at school, and it was captured on video and released to the public, and she committed suicide 2 days later. Her parents have now sued the district, but most specifically the principal and the assistant principal, that they had a duty to act to stop this that was going on, but that ethically they had a duty to act, and they didn't. And so it's going to hinge on exactly what we're talking about. Not only did you follow the policy, do the legal thing, the policy thing, but did you do the ethical thing as well? And you can be taken to court over the ethical piece as well. And they're going to lose, by the way. I can tell you that right now. If there's evidence that they weren't, that this had happened to other students and they were aware of it, and they had a duty to act and didn't, it's not going to go well for them. I put it in under Zoom session 3. I've got liability. It's up to top. I put that in. You can read that article. But again, you're not king or queen as principal. This notion that you have all this discretion, you do not. That is the dirtiest word I know in the school business, is discretion. All right, we're to the ethical paradigms. Thank you. Move on.
I had the next slide, the ethical paradigms, and as it relates to the role of the principal. The 4 ethical paradigms are justice, care, critique, and profession. Do you have the next slide, Josh? Okay, I got it. All right, as it relates to justice, the role of the principal as it relates to the 4 ethical paradigms, justice. The role of a school principal as it relates to the 4 ethical paradigms,
As school leaders are approached with an ethical dilemma as Bobby, then the ethic of justice focuses on the individual rights of the student, Bobby, and how his rights relate to any of the law or policy. And as leaders, we must ask if or how a law was broken, then consider whether the rules should be enforced if needed or if it has been broken. And in Bobby's case, to me, due process was not followed correctly. The teacher made her own judgment. She was not fair, in my opinion. She could have possibly given partial credit or an opportunity to resubmit. The next one is critique. And from an administrative perspective, the ethic of critique as it relates to the situation with Bobby can be uncomfortable to apply because it often challenges the rules of engagement and behavior within the school. If it is applied then as an administrator, maybe he needs to be more aware and sensitive to how some laws might be biased or skewed toward the benefit of a certain group more than others. And in the situation with Bobby, I think the teacher's actions were misguided. Care, as an administrator or teacher, the question should be that of how has Bobby been nurtured and encouraged in the school environment, and should always be considered, and whether his needs are being addressed. The ethic of care mostly emphasizes personal relationship and its challenges. In Bobby's case, the teacher did not make effort to connect to Bobby to discuss a solution. And professional. The teacher in the case of Bobby should consider the context of the educational profession and strive to make the most ethical decision possible by adopting personal and professional codes that must be upheld in order to guide daily practice. The principal's role to me, as well as the teacher, is to be accountable for the academic success of the students in the school.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that's it. I mean, again, on the DPI Zoom today, we were working on principal standards. I'm there to represent the preparation programs. There were superintendents there who and principals as well, principal of the year, a couple of them. But the whole notion here is while we're trying to figure out the best way to prepare principals and the best way to evaluate principals, in the end, it all circles back to student achievement. That was even mentioned again today, that you can't discount that part of it. Are students learning? Are they growing? That's the bottom line in our business. That's the only reason why we have principals. They don't teach students. And so, yes, it's accountability for academic success. That's the profession. Critiques human rights, equal protection under the 14th Amendment, care, discipline, concern. Are you concerned about these kids? Fairness, arbitrary and capricious. You have to put yourself through these, not just the legal dimensions of the case or policy dimensions, but these ethical pieces too, when you start making decisions about what you're going to do with kids and their future. I mean, in this case, the most punishment you can give any kid is to put him out of school for a year. And that's what he got for turning in his brother's homework assignment. When you put it in those terms, there's nobody on the street that would say, yeah, that's what you ought to do. Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. Even if it weren't illegal, think of the ethical piece of it. So don't ever forget the ethical piece, and especially that care piece. Restorative justice when you're doing discipline with kids. That's where that piece comes in. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. All right, course of action. What should the principal do? Excellent. Move on.
Start that with something from actually chapter 2 from our book, and it said the principals must not increase their own liability through improper action or lack of action in response to incidents that occur on their campus. And so even though that was back, we just worked on that last week, kind of looking at that, it really was the first thing I thought of as we looked at this. So I wanted to put that in here first. So first off, the principal in relationship to the student needs to assure that due process is followed by interviewing the student and allowing a witness, notifying the parents of the incident, and then enforce the school's discipline policy related to cheating. So that's the first steps. That's how he can go through and make those things correct with the student and the parents as well in that process. The other end of that, though, is how he handles things with the teacher. And that starts with assuring the teacher corrects her grading policy to match the rest of the school and or district. And that way you put that back into a legal standing. And then review the cheating policy with the teacher to determine if the student would be able to redo the assignment. And as we've mentioned already before, you can't be punished on two different grounds. It needs to be just handled within discipline, and therefore there should be an opportunity to redo the assignment so that the grade can be replaced with the actual score that the student deserves. However, that grade only needs to count up to that 10%. It can't be still left at the policy that the teacher was making up and using on her own.
Exactly.
And that's our wrap up.
Excellent. All right. I want to do a couple things. You can stop your sharing now. If you will go back, and I've got an example of one. If you'll go back to, let's see, let me move this out of the way. Oh gosh, let's see. Yeah, here we go. All right. In next week, if you'll look under the CMS Code of Conduct under Zoom session 5, what you'll see is when it pops up here, your district has a code of conduct. Hopefully it's published. Hopefully you've seen it. Hopefully it's, you can find it without having to hunt it. Let me move this out of the way. There it comes. All right. And so it will define, again, the state defines what the incidents are. The local then adopts what consequences will go with this. We'll cover this in depth next week. But what I want you to see is this. Your district will address this. It's not your opinion. And I'll get there in just one second. Misrepresentation, cheating, which is a UB honor code violation. Honesty, but not included plagiarism or copying the sign or privilege. Okay. Level 1 response. And if we go and look at what are the level 1 responses, see page 9. I'll bet you. There, it's coming back up. Here we go. Level 1 responses. Nowhere under level 1 responses does it say you can fail him for the year. The most that you can do in that vein is 1 day of in-school suspension. If you wanted to do that, it's just conferences, after school detention, things like that. So on an infraction that the consequence carries a maximum of 1 day ISS, he got a whole year out of school. Nowhere in there does it say that you can affect his grade either. This is a disciplinary infraction. So make sure you know what the policy is in your district. Make sure you've read your code of conduct. Make sure you understand your tier system or your level system. Make sure you understand how that works. So that you don't get yourself in Dutch over something like that. Now, also under here, I think, let me get out of that. Let's see, did I put it under case study 1? I had to go back and redo the link. Yep, it's working now. I've had students go down the rabbit hole of it's the coach's fault. No, he may be practicing baseball or doing travel ball, and that may be, but that is not your issue. Your issue is if he's on the school baseball team, you should already know how often they're practicing. Are they following the guidelines? Can sports teams practice or play on teacher work day? No. Can they practice or play on a holiday? No. How long can they practice per day? 90 minutes maximum. All those are clearly defined by sport. I mean, down to the nth degree in that handbook right there. Now, if you don't know what's going on, you might better go check, but you shouldn't have to have a case like this to know what's going on with your athletics. Are you following all the rules on your athletics? And you better be following them to the T. It better not take a case like this for you to bother to go out and find out what's going on. But no, this is not an athletic issue. Not at all. Now, last thing. I'm going to put you on the spot. Team 1 here. Tamala, Kizzy, Melody, and Josh. What are you going to do with this teacher? You going to put her on an action plan to improve her behavior?
Yes.
Or you just going to write her up? Or you going to move for her dismissal? Which of the three?
I would say
Write her up, put her on an action plan, or move for her dismissal.
I would
considering it's probably the first instance that we know of, probably the writer up that could possibly lead to an action plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
I agree with that.
So
Yeah.
so the idea here is, because this is the first time. All right. When you go to court for capital murder, first degree, does it matter if it's the first or second time?
I hope not.
No, it doesn't.
No, it
It
isn't.
does not. What could she, short of physically or sexually abusing a child, what could she have done that would have been worse to a child than to try to deny them a whole year of their life and education?
Mm.
Yeah, she probably need to be sat down for a little while. Yeah. Send her
Well,
home. I don't know.
Now, y'all know,
I
you
don't
can
want
tell
to
by
fire
looking
her.
at
I
them,
don't want to release her from her job.
you know,
Well, she released him from school for a whole year.
that's,
Yeah.
you go, Tamala, me and Tamala, me and you, me and you. Now I'm old school. Full disclosure, I have not, I was only a principal for a half a year in this century before I went to central office. I was, the last quarter of the last century is when I was out and about, was young, but now I'm just telling you, I'm just old school. She's got to go. If I can't have somebody that would do this to a child in the building. That's just not my conscience. I'm sorry. I'd be worried about what she's going to do next to top that.
Right. I mean, within that situation, you can't trust her to do what she's contractually obligated to do. So at that point, if you can't trust someone, then they don't need to be in your building.
That's right. That's what I'm telling you. Now the board may not go along with me, but I'm tell you what, I'm going to try. I'm going to recommend her dismissal. Superintendent may not go along with it. The board may not, but I have to make a statement to everybody else in the building and all the parents and all the kids that this is not acceptable, that this can't be, that we can't prey on kids. Again, short of physically abusing a child or sexually abusing a child, this is the worst thing you can do to a kid. If not this, what is your threshold? What would it take to get rid of a teacher?
Mm-hmm.
If they would try to take a whole year of a kid's life, and you just drop a letter in their jacket in their personnel file, I don't know. Now, one of the things that I often hear is, well, the other teachers will be mad if you punish a teacher. No, they'll be mad if you don't, because they're professionals. And if not, the culture's bad in your building. If they want to support some nitwit that does something like this, you don't want their support anyway. They need to find some other place to work. Kids come first in the building. That's your job as principal, to make sure that kids come first and that you protect them. Character, critique, profession.
Lamb, I have a question.
Justice.
What if we transfer her to another school, or is that?
Don't pass the trash. Oh no, don't do that. Oh, don't do that. You'll make all your colleagues mad.
Okay, never mind.
You won't have anybody to eat lunch with at principal's meeting if you do something like that. You'll be over there. You'll be like the kids at the little table during Thanksgiving. All the adults will be at the big table. They'll make you sit somewhere else.
Okay,
Do not
never
pass the trash. Of all the options, that's the least favorable.
Okay.
You got to work with these people now. I'm gonna tell you, you better not do that to them.
And
Okay.
I've seen that happen several times in my district.
You know you have. One of
I
my
have a
doctoral
question.
students that just finished as principal in a small Western North Carolina district. Sometimes when I go home on Fridays from the mountains, I stop by her school. I lived in that little town one time, a long time ago, and I really liked her little school in that little town. And I just love her. She was one of my favorite doctoral students ever. And she was so hurt this year. It's a small district. It's only got 14 schools. That one of her colleagues basically told one of their teachers who had become a meth addict that if she would transfer, that she wouldn't turn her in for drug use at school, and dumped her on my friend Jennifer, my doctoral student. Well, she just graduated December, and she just couldn't believe that one of her colleagues would do that. And I told her, what you need to do is tell everybody what she did or what he did. You need to tell everybody so that they'll know that he can't, the group needs to sanction him or he'll keep on doing that. But, you know, he was new to the district. They'd hired him from outside, and he, you know, but they'll take care of him. I'll guarantee you they'll take care of him. He'll rue the day that he did that to her, because as soon as it gets out, she's beloved and he's not. He won't survive beyond. This was his first year in that district. He won't survive in that district. He'll be done. And I told her, if you won't tell it, I will. People like that don't need to be in our business. That would do something like that. That lady needed help. All he's done is facilitated her to fall deeper into her addiction. He's not done anybody any favors, thinking he's slick. I'm old, but I got fired up on my side. Let's meet out in the road. We'll see how that goes. But you just don't do that to your colleagues. You just don't do that. I know that it has happened. I know, and as Kizzy pointed out, in large districts like CMS, you know, that's likely to happen because everybody thinks it won't come back on them. Trust me, it'll come back. It will come back. And it won't take long. And when people find out, they'll be waiting in line to get you. So again, anywhere from a letter in the jacket to an action plan to move for dismissal, I vote for the move for dismissal. Any of the other two, you know, let your conscience be your guide on that. But you got to do something. The point is, you've got to do something. You can't just wait for her to try this again. And it's, you know, whatever your tolerance for conflict will allow. Managing people is conflict. Again, you don't teach kids anymore. You know, one of the questions you'll be asked in interviewing for a job, they'll slip around, they'll ask you if it paid exactly the same. That's the caveat. Hear the question clearly. If it paid exactly the same, would you prefer to work with kids as a teacher or work with adults as an administrator? Now, if you tell them, oh, I love working with kids, they'll let you keep on working. You got to understand, when you become a school administrator, you no longer have the luxury of working with kids who fill up your heart every day. You have to now work with adults who pee on your leg every day. That's what you do now. It's a completely different thing. Yeah, not near as much fun as working with kids. All right, you did a great job. I'm so excited. I told you we'd have a great time on case study now.
Can I ask a question real quick before?
Yes. We're going to talk a while now. We're going to talk. Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do.
So you said that the basically this decision keeps the student out of school for a year. I was confused. He gets the summer. He doesn't get to do the summer.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't. The law is very clear in that disciplinary data manual. It counts as a zero tolerance suspension expulsion for a year. Even if you let them go to an alternative school, even if you let them go to summer, doesn't matter. It's still a zero tolerance. They're still out for a year.
For the sport.
That's the definition. And this notion that we'll just make him go to what if he chooses not to go to summer school?
Right,
What
so
if he
then
goes
he
and he's
fails a
not
year and he
successful?
has to repeat the whole next year, so
No,
that's.
you
okay.
can't say it's not really a zero tolerance out for the year because, you know, if he doesn't know, you assigned it. And if he doesn't go to summer school or if he's not successful, it's a year out, folks.
Okay,
So under the zero tolerance policy law, which is in that disciplinary data handbook, and I also put a link to a document that summarizes it for you. Even if you say, well, he can go to alternative school, right choices for 6 weeks, or he can go to summer school, doesn't matter. That does not change the fact that you put that kid out of school illegally for a whole year. And it says that clearly, because that's one of those kind of things. You go to your doctor, you get to be my age, you know, this kind of stuff matters to you. You go to your doctor and he says, you know, we're gonna have to take your foot off. You're like, oh my God. And he says, well, maybe we'll just take your little toe off. You're like, oh, that's okay. But now if he'd started with little toe, you'd have been upset. So he starts big. And so that's what some people do. It's very unethical. They start with the most punishment we could ever give you, but we'll give you this little bit punishment or lesser so that you won't complain or sue us or appeal our decision. Principals are bad to do that. Don't do that either, because again, you get into that capricious, you know, you were skipping class. I'm gonna give you 10 days out. And then the parents appeal and go, I'll just give them one. No. Don't get into that. If it just carries one, give them the one. Don't be trying to play hero. And I'll say this, when you get to be principal, don't be trying to be hero on the back of your assistant principals. Now, I know principals that will, because it happened to them, it was done to them, kind of like hazing in a fraternity. Because it was done to me, I got to do it to them. What they'll do is, you know that every disciplinary action handed down at the school, it can be appealed. The assistant principal's decision can be appealed to the principal to the area soup and on up the line. A lot of them will say, I want you to give the maximum every time. So that and the unsaid part is so that I can reduce it to the minimum and be a hero for the parents. Do not make your reputation on the backs of your APs, because they will hate you. And they'll tell everybody that'll listen what a turd you are. And you are for doing that. Again, you will kill yourself in the business for doing things like that. But I know principals, that's exactly, they make their APs give the maximum on the tier or the level system. They make them give the maximum. So the parent will be forced to appeal, and then they'll reduce it to whatever the minimum is. And, hey, look at me. I'm the hero here. No, you're an asshole. Pardon my language, but that's exactly what you are. So don't get into that. And that's why the federal law says it's still a zero tolerance. It's still a year. That you're doing that bait and switch deal on something lesser. Feds don't play that game. And when they catch you doing this, they'll end you in the school business. And so make sure you read that zero tolerance policy well. But that's a great point. That was good, bringing that one up. That's a good catch. Doesn't matter that there's something mitigating. We go with what you did to start with. And so that's illegal to give a year out of school for turning in your brother's homework paper. Good catch. Other questions? All right. We got another group ready to go? Go. Share your screen and let's hit it. Let me stop my camera. That'll usually help get it to share better. See if it'll work now. There it goes.
I'm trying to get rid of this black thing up top so I can make it. How do you do that? So I can make it like the video like thing. But this thing is covering it. Can you see my total screen? How do you get rid of the black?
Go down to the bottom.
At the
where it
bottom,
says
you have a
notes.
Oh, there it goes. It's gone.
little icon at the bottom to go ahead and do your slideshow as well, instead of having to use one at the top.
Oh, really? Okay, well. Why is it not doing it? Okay,
There you go.
I got it. So, we didn't number our team. I don't know exactly what number we are. But I am Adrienne Stokes King.
Teen 8.
We have Brandon Reeves and Larry. You guys can introduce yourselves so everybody know who you are. If you like.
With Teen 8, Brandon Reeves, third grade teacher, Greensboro, North Carolina.
Larry Richardson, Dean of Interventions and Social Studies teacher in Rowan Salisbury Schools at the alternative school.
Very good. So we named our students' do's and don'ts, what you should be doing, and what I will be doing as an administrator. So I'll read the first slide. We're going to go back and forth, just like the other team did. So what should the principal's course of action be? And we were talking about how we address in due process and all of that. I'm not going to read. Okay, so I'll just read from the slide. Because the teacher did not have any authority to assign away the 50% to that work, the real cheating takes a back seat initially, even though due process was followed in terms of cheating and the repercussions. The student should be permitted to redo the work or leave it as it stands, but have it weighted as it should be.
All right. Your slide should read due process was not followed. There was no referral to the office for cheating. Can the teacher investigate on her own? That is
Well, I
not
guess
due process.
in that way, from the other team, I was like, yeah, they didn't do that. But I guess we were thinking about whether or not the parent knew that cheating was not permitted, because when they went over it in the handbook, they knew
That's
initially.
not due process.
That's
Due
not
process is how you treat the kid from
okay.
the school.
From
Substantive is, what does the law say the kid gets? How do you keep, okay? The first thing is you write a referral and it goes to an administrator. They collect
Right.
witness statements. They allow the kid to give his testimony, write a statement. You know, there's several things that have to happen down the line. And that's your next one is to go out and interview your administrator. What is your due process protocol or procedure, the substance of that in your school? And then the substantive, that's the substantive. The procedural is, did you follow it or not? So first step in due process would have been to write a referral and refer this to a school administrator. Did that happen? No. So after that, doesn't matter. Everything, then there is no due process. Well, but we did this. If you didn't do that, you didn't start the due process. And so there was no due process for this child. There would have had to have been a referral written, sent to the office, administrator called the kid in and started the due process. That did not happen.
Okay,
The
so
teacher
the fact
just
that
completely outlawed this one.
if they're cheating, if the rule is that if you cheat you get a 0, that's not part of it.
That's not the rule, though. Again, cheating is not.
You can't use academics. So
No,
you can't give a 0.
it's a disciplinary. Nothing in the policy says that you can punish a kid's grade.
Okay.
It's a disciplinary infraction. It is not an academic. You can't take points or their grade. You can't just give them a 0. You have to write a referral for, again, if we go back, well, you've got it shared now. If we go back to the state manual that identifies what infractions are, it says cheating is a disciplinary infraction.
Level 1.
And your district says this is how much punishment we give. But the state defines what the infractions are. The district puts the punishment level to it. Cheating is a disciplinary infraction. It is not an academic. You can't give them kids 0s.
So I know that, I understand what you're saying, but a lot of teachers do that.
I don't care what they do.
I know, I'm just saying
all
that's
fun and games
really
till you get your
bad.
eye put out. Till you get caught,
We're
But I
learning a
know
lot.
that they do that, but they're not supposed to do that. And as an administrator, you better tell them, don't do that.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, because a lot of people do
Again,
that. That's
Yeah,
bad.
but that's illegal to do that. It
Yeah,
is not. You can't punish a kid academically. It is a disciplinary infraction.
okay.
You write a referral. And you got to teach your teachers to do that, because the right parent comes along and catches you doing that, you lose your job and your house. Because you violated their equal protection under the 14th Amendment. You've denied them their due process. That's federal law that overarches all of this. Is federal law, equal protection under the law. You get caught doing this, you'll lose your job. If you're allowing teachers to assign zeros rather than following the due process, which is write a referral, you will lose your job as a principal. You will never get another.
Wow.
So again, sounds minor until you understand, because what is the first subsection law under North Carolina and South Carolina law? Who is responsible to grade and classify kids?
Principal.
And see, this is a case of both of those. I don't think I'd pointed that out before. Grade is what grade does the kid get, classifies what grade, whether they pass or fail or not. That's solely your responsibility as a school principal, solely. Teachers do not assign final grades. They do not make pass-fail decisions, period. That's completely up to you. And for that to be based on an illegality, like given an academic punishment, a grade punishment for a disciplinary infraction, you will lose your job. They will own your house, because you will lose the civil case that comes with it. So that, that people have done it since, beginning of school is immaterial until you get caught.
Right.
And you when you go to court, you can't say, well, everybody's always done it. Or just like if you get a speeding ticket, you can't go to court and say everybody was speeding. Won't matter. This is the one that gets you. This is the one that looks minor, that more people lose their job over than anything what we consider to be minor. That's what we're talking about. If it's a disciplinary infraction, teachers write the referral, send it to the office. This is not hard. You got, and then you're out of it. And you have to tell teachers, then you're out of it. After that, it's up to me, because the law says I do this and you do that. Now, if you want to do what I do, go get you an administrative degree and get your license, and you can do this. But until then, I'll let you know when it's your day to be in charge. Today's my day. I'll let you know when it's yours. And that's what you have to tell teachers. Today's my day. I'll let you know when it's your day to be in charge and make these decisions.
Dr. Lamb.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is Quintina. In a situation where a teacher and a principal, I have a student that's homebound, and the teacher.
Oh, now we're talking about EC now. All the rules go out the window now on EC. Okay. All right, so go right ahead. I'll see if I can answer it.
Okay, so if a principal, the teacher assigned the student some assignments, and they had to make up from quarter 1 in quarter 2, and then when quarter 2 came in, they didn't get a chance to complete all of quarter 2 assignments, and the teacher failed the student because they didn't complete all the assignments. And when I directed back to the teacher, was like, why they can't make up the assignments? The teacher said, well, quarter 2 closed and I'm not allowing them to make up the word.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
I know that.
You make that decision, not the teacher.
But I'm shocked for the principal not to address the teacher.
Well, a lot of principals won't, because it's EC. They think the EC department ought to have to do that. Okay. That's normal. That is normal.
I would have to ask you some stuff after we finish all of this.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is principals don't want to touch EC at all.
Okay.
They want the EC department and the EC director to have to do those things. They do not want to get involved. However, if that kid's on your roll, and they are, you better be involved. But a lot of principals will run from anything EC, which is not smart. And that's exactly what's happening in that case. But the teacher doesn't decide when there's late work or when the principal makes those decisions. Again, all things about grade and classification go back to the principal. But when EC's involved, they just don't want to get involved. They say, well, the EC director needs to get involved in that. No, it's your student. EC kids are still your kids. That's one of the biggest things that we can't get school administrators to understand. They still belong to you. You're still responsible for them. I don't care that there's an EC director or that they've been identified. They still belong to you. That's why you'll hear principals argue, them kids' scores shouldn't count against me. They're your kids. What are you talking about? Brandon, you had a question?
It was kind of like to piggyback off what Quintina just asked, but it was more like a regular teacher, educator. So when you got a student that's been absent the whole quarter, then they come in 2 days before the quarter end, they missed all instructions. And they don't like, what do you do?
What do you mean, what do you do?
I mean,
in what context?
Far as grading, they come in the day before the quarter ends.
It goes back to your county policy, your district policy on attendance and absence and excused absence and medical and all of those things.
This is students in transition. So transitional student, I mean, like maybe homeless or living situations.
Well, see, now they've got McKinney-Vento protection. If they're homeless, you can't fail them.
Right. But I mean, so what do you put on a report card? Because my administrator
you
didn't
put
give me
whatever
any advice.
your district tells you to put. Most of the time it's an I.
Okay, so I. Okay.
But remember, those homeless kids have protections. Again, there's not a one size fits all answer for all these things. You better know what is their placement. McKinney-Vento, you can't be failing homeless kids that have been out of school, that haven't been in membership. You have to be careful about EC kids, about what you can and can't do. Your district has policies on all this stuff. That's why you're supposed to go out and ask these people. But McKinney, I can tell you on McKinney-Vento, you give them an incomplete. They're homeless. They get the same protections as EC kids.
Okay. Yeah, it's no, the administration doesn't really supply any wisdom or knowledge.
They don't want to because they don't know anything.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Since so many teachers give failing grade for cheating, is it because the principals don't know, or they just
don't know?
Fly?
They're dumb as dirt.
Okay.
They just don't know.
Like no one ever says anything about that.
Well, they won't, and the reason why they don't know is because they don't want to know. They want plausible deniability. They think if they don't know, then they're like Homer Simpson. What you don't know won't hurt you. That's a level of thought they have, and especially if it's a program that has an executive or a director, they want them to be responsible and know. They don't want to learn themselves. But I'm telling you, if you don't understand FAPE, free and appropriate education, if you don't understand EC law, McKinney-Vento, we'll have a big module. If you don't understand that, it's going to come back and get you. You can't just put it on somebody else to know this stuff. You're supposed to know this stuff. But yes, many of them do it because they don't want to get involved because they don't want to do EC every day. They don't want to be involved. They think if they pretend not to know it, that they can't be held accountable. That is not true.
Well, I told the principal, I said, well, due to the fact that the child is on homebound, they have extended time to do their work.
Yes, they do. Because that's in their IEP. I'll guarantee you. Homebound kids, it's in their IEP.
Well, this child did not have an IEP. The superintendent placed this child on homebound.
But as soon as he did, he has in effect an IEP, whether they wrote it or whether they didn't. You gave him those rights when you put him on homebound.
Yes, and that's what I said. And I told the principal, I said they have extended time.
Yes,
till the end of the school year to complete.
Yes, you were exactly right.
I understand because my ex-wife used to deal with that, and he said, I promise I'll get back to you by Thursday. And today is now Tuesday and I still have not heard from him. And I was like, do I put it in black and white to cover myself as the homebound?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Now, most homebound, when the superintendent made them homebound, they got the same rights and protections,
Okay.
same rules, whether they replaced that, whether they went through the process or not. Now, here's the part about homebound that Kentina just was talking about. Homebound, the maximum on homebound is 4 hours a day. So
they extended to 5. No, 4 hours. You're right. 4 hours. You're right.
4 hours. Now, what that means is because the normal instructional day is considered to be 6, they automatically get an extension of 35% on the time automatically. And they can be given more than that because their day is only 4 hours long.
Mhm.
It's simple math here, folks. They only do 2/3 of a normal day. So they get a third more time because they didn't have, they're a third short every day. So their time is always extended at least. Now, most IEPs or PEPs that I've seen give them
50%.
extend 50%. It's usually in the 50% range, but it's always got to be at least 33 because the differential in the length of the instructional day. It's simple math.
So
Homebound is the most is 4 hours.
If they just, now if a teacher go in and say, some of the teachers was, because it's a high school student, they would decrease the amount of work they were given. Instead of giving them the full amount of assignments they would give a regular student that's there every day, they decrease the amount. So I addressed that to this specific teacher and she was like, I don't care what their circumstances are, they still have to do the same amount of work in the same amount of time. And I'm thinking, like,
well, in fact, they are doing it in the same amount of time. If you consider that their instructional day is a third less, you got to give them a third more time. And that is an equitable amount of time. I don't know, she must not be a math teacher to understand that.
But I'm glad you addressed that. So I know how to address that.
Yes. Now, the problem in high school with giving the reduced workload to match the reduced length of the instructional day, the problem with that comes up at EOC time, as you know, at the end of course time when they give the course exam. That's what you run the risk of on that. It's okay to do it. It's not illegal to do that. Just understand if that's one of those courses that has an end of course exam that counts on your state report card, you could be doing yourself a bad deal there. But Kentina, I actually like that better than the extended time. I like the reduced workload better. Because that way you don't bleed over into the next semester. You're still doing last semesters, and so it becomes a vicious cycle. I'm always doing last semester's work, not doing this semester's work. I like the reduced workload. Now that's what I always, when I was a high school principal, that's what I told our teachers to do. Because I had a situation just like in the MSA program where folks didn't do their work in the summer. They wanted a vacation and they didn't do their work and they got an incomplete, and they did their work in the fall, but then they didn't do their fall work. It becomes a vicious cycle is what I'm saying. And so for me, I like the reduced workload rather than the extended time because it goes into the next time. And that's simply how that works. But either one is legal, but no, the teacher is wrong. They do get extended time because they have a shorter day or shorter instructional day by at least a third.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on now. Remember, this student did not get due process. A referral was not written. This student, Bobby, was not sent to the office for disciplinary, a due process disciplinary trail. The teacher handled this one herself.
Okay. So one of the things that we pointed out was if she did the 50%, that she needed to go back and redo that for all the students that took that assignment.
No, you can't do the 50% is illegal. That the more than
no,
50%.
then if it's in there though, she did that across the board for all the students. So she need to go back in place.
No, she
that
didn't
way-
do that. She can't put that in there. She didn't commit that to writing. She just
She just did it
decided
for
to
that
do
one
that.
She
She just did it to one student.
Oh, that's
Told him
even
his
worse.
counted more than 50%.
Oh, okay.
You know,
That's
I
even
know
worse.
she's not a very nice person, but I'm quite sure that she wasn't dumb enough to put in writing that she had violated state law and local policy.
Yeah, that's correct. That's not good at all.
No.
Okay, so I'll go to the next slide. We're going to talk about the 4 ethical paradigms. And this is all the different things under justice. So we'll talk
Now,
about,
it doesn't fit all of these, but these are the kinds of things that you have to look at under justice. Now,
right.
under
So
this
then
one,
on the
fairness,
next slide,
equity, and justice, arbitrary and capricious is the standard on this one. So when we look at that one,
okay, so under justice,
justice was not upheld, due process was not given, that the mother signs the handbook has nothing to do with due process.
right,
And it didn't say in the handbook that he would get a 0. It said it may result in a 0 on the actual activity. It didn't say that it would. If you don't do the makeup, it could. But you have to understand, the handbook cannot say if you cheat, we can give you a 0 or we can fail you for the year. We can only give you a failing grade on that assignment. You have to
right.
understand federal law that it can't say that we can fail you for the year. You have to, people say, why don't you change that wording in that case study? Because I want you to understand that you have to be smart enough to know that it can't say we can fail you for the year, that we can only give you a failing grade on the assignment if you refuse to do the makeup.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
If
Okay.
you refuse to do the makeup that we assign and do your punishment, then you can get a failing grade on that assignment. We need to make that clear up front, but only on that assignment. We can't give you a failing grade for the year over one assignment. And we can only give you a failing grade if you refuse the remediation. See, that's the part that has to be there. That's the part that keeps kids from saying, well, I'm not going to redo that. I've already turned it in once. You can't give me a fail. Yes, if you don't redo the assignment, or if you don't meet the conditions, we will give you a failing grade on that assignment.
Right.
That's the teeth in making them do the recompense. Whatever you assign that they had to do, write another one, redo it, whatever that you did.
But that's the reason why I was saying, even if he didn't do the assignment, he got a 0 on that assignment. If it's only, the weight is only 10%, it's not going to affect
Still not going
the
to fail
whole
him. Exactly
outcome.
right. So
Right.
you have to understood. You have to understand. It's implied that you could get a failing grade if you don't do your remediation, whatever it is,
Right.
and and only on that assignment. It's
Right.
not a failing grade for the year.
Right.
I've had a lot of people that have interpreted it as, it says right here that he might fail. No, it doesn't say for the year. You have to understand that it only refers to the assignment in question.
Okay.
And this made me think back to teachers I had, where they would be like, if you don't do the assignment, you fail for the year.
Yeah, I mean, people have been that abusive. But nowadays, the news will beat you home with social media and all the justice centers out there, the Southern Law Poverty Center, and all the people out there that are looking out for people that need to be looked out for. You're not going to do this nowadays. Somebody, or if you do, you won't do it often because somebody will catch you before long. But this is the kind of thing that we're talking about. And so under care, concern, and connection, I mean, we should be concerned about Bobby rather than, trying to harm Bobby. That's the issue here. The teacher was intentionally trying to harm Bobby. And Larry, you're right. There's teachers out there who intentionally try to harm kids. They're smart enough not to slap one or do something sexual to one, but they do just as much or more harm psychologically with trying to harm them academically. the school to prison pipeline. Did you read that article that I put for this one? I mean, we intentionally harm kids in school because we know that they'll be unsuccessful in society, and that's what keeps the prisons full and keeps that prison industrial complex going, where people make billions of dollars a year on prisons every year. Prisons are a big business. The food service provider at Gardner Webb University is the biggest provider of prison food in the United States. They make billions of dollars on prison food, and what they serve at Gardner Webb is about like prison food. Airmark. And so, I mean, prisons are big business, folks. Don't let anybody fool you. Prisons are big business. You got to keep the customers coming. You know, our prisons are full of nonviolent offenders for ridiculous things, but we got to keep the pipeline rolling. And so it's our job to make sure that our teachers aren't feeding that pipeline by doing dumb things like this and harmful things like this. All right, move on.
With CARE, you said as soon as you started talking that Bobby's needs have not come first.
That is correct.
And
that's the whole notion of care is that you're supposed to care for these kids in loco parentis. That means in place of the parent. You're to provide care in place of the parent. That's your charge as a teacher.
And we say discipline, Bobby should either get a 0 for cheating on the assignment or be permitted to redo the assignment. Being a teacher, I said, as a principal, it would make me think like if she did it to him, that means she's done this in the past.
Of course she has.
This hasn't been caught. So then.
Yeah, it was somebody, somebody who looked more like you than me. That she's done it to before, but this was White Bobby that, he had parents that, that had a little clout in the community. And so all of a sudden it came to light, but she did it to Bobby. There's no telling how many kids of color she did it to, or kids that are less than, in her opinion, economically. See, that's what we're talking about here. That's where you've got to be taking care as an administrator to make sure that this kind of stuff isn't happening. But yeah, this is not her first time. It's just her first time with a kid that has the stature in the community for this to be reviewed. How many kids did she do this to that their parents thought, well, that's just the way it works, or didn't have a parent? That homeless kid. How many of them has this been done to? What you've done to me, and the least to me you've done to me. What did Jesus say? And so, I mean, that's the notion here is we need to, we don't treat people based on their social status, their skin color, or their economic status. But unfortunately, I mean, that's what justice is about, and care. We need to care for these kids. You do realize that public schools are not in the Constitution. They're in the preamble to the Constitution that states may provide public schools for people, for poor kids, for kids that this is their only hope of getting out of their situation. Being poor is situational. Being in poverty is generational. The only way to break generational poverty is education. And then you're denying that kid so social class, again, on critique, social class plays a big part in this, and corrupted morals. Bobby's a turd, I'm going to get him. His family, I hate them. They think they're better than everybody else. I'm going to get them. That's what we're talking about here. And the corrupted morals are I'll the ends justify the means. My goal is to get Bobby to knock them down a peg. And so that's what that is.
We also talked about the power.
Now, the dean of students and the superintendent did not do anything wrong. They just mentioned what these people are, and they're supposed to, that you need to be careful, cross your T's, make sure due process has been followed, that all laws and policies have been carried out, because this one will go to court, and it will be there will be this will all be looked at very closely under a microscope. You need to do that now. The superintendent was not attempting to intimidate anybody. You know, he simply said, these people have the wherewithal, the means, that they won't be like some of these other kids that can't afford an attorney or won't show up for hearing because they got to work. These people have the means to do that. You better know that. You better do your job. Make sure that you follow all the proper steps. That's exactly what the superintendent told you. That's what the superintendent is supposed to tell you. That's what I told principals. I can't tell you what to do because that's against the law. You grade and classify pupils. That is solely up to you. But I'm telling you, you better make sure that due process was followed, because this one's going to go to court. Don't be in court and you know, I'm just here to support the teacher. I know she did wrong. Oh no, I'll fire you and her. Don't be that idiot that just went along with the teacher because you thought you'd be unpopular with your faculty if you didn't. Don't be that idiot. You better make sure due process was followed, because if you don't, I'm going to get you. That's the way this goes. You're not going to put this district under this liability because you refused to do your job because you didn't want to be unpopular. We're not junior high girls. I don't care about your popularity. I care about you following. I hired you to follow the law and policy, period. Your popularity is not even on the radar. You will follow the law and policy. So these people have the wherewithal. You better be smart enough to know that you better have done the right thing. That's exactly what I'd have been a whole lot more demonstrative than this superintendent was. He seemed awfully kind to me. I didn't talk to people that kind when they were being idiots. I can tell you that. I used to go and ask them, what were you doing that we weren't paying you for?
I think we were paying more attention to all
what
this.
we are paying you for. I mean,
we were paying
that's part
attention
of it.
to some of the stuff that was in there. You said in the beginning, kind of throw out all that stuff that was being said, because we were talking about.
You're supposed to be able to wade through that and know what law
Right.
and policy is.
Right.
You're not supposed to go down every rabbit hole. That, I mean, I'll have some in all the cases. We'll have something that's a red herring that gets you to look away from what's important here.
Okay.
Did this teacher follow due process? No.
Okay.
Did she break the law? Yes. Did she just make it up? Was she, how ridiculous is one assignment, whether it's homework or out of school, counts more than half the yearly grade for a 200-day school year. One out of class assignment counts more than half the yearly grade. Right. I mean, you could talk to people out on the street, and the general public is stupid, by the way, and even they know that wouldn't be the right thing if you couldn't do that. And so, yes, there's things in here that's supposed to throw you off, but the superintendent did what he was supposed to do.
Right.
Again, I've asked principals, what were you doing that we weren't paying you for that prevented you from doing what we were paying you for? Maybe I could help you into another career, like later today. Have I got your attention? You're going to do what you're supposed to when you're supposed to, or I'm going to get me a new ox. What does Mark 14:1 say? If your ox is in the ditch and it's Sunday, you can get him out because it's an emergency. But if your ox is in the ditch every Sunday, I need a new ox. Well, if I have to keep coming back because you refuse to follow law and policy, then I'm just going to get me somebody else, new ox. That's kind of conversations you have in large urban districts. We don't talk, oh, honey, baby, please. Now, the two rural districts I worked in, it was a different tenor. But you go to Charlotte or Raleigh, one of the big places, they don't talk to you, honey, baby, please. They don't care about your feelings, because you have the Children's Law Center and other groups there that will sue on behalf of students if they can't afford it. And you'll stay in court all the time if your administrators do dumb things. All the time. At $12,000 a pop every time you get caught doing something stupid like this. Yeah. So I'm teaching you to be an administrator in a large urban district. If you work in a small rural where everybody knows everybody, good for you. But you need to be trained to work anywhere, that you understand how law works and policy works. and that, and that you can work somewhere other than where your uncle's on the school board and protecting your job. Because that's not going to happen for everybody. You got to know what law and policy is so that you can operate and keep your job in your house. All right, move on. We've got this one. Warning, coaching, document, place teacher file. It's pretty light. Pretty
Yeah, we
light.
didn't say fire her.
No, y'all went with the lightest of the options. At least you went with something. And I respect that. But one of these days when your lens changes, when you're sitting on the other side of the desk, it may change your view of this teacher consequence as well. All right, move on.
Dr. Lamb, I won't be honest. I was on the fire her.
You were on,
He really
good for
was.
you.
He really
Good for you,
was.
Larry.
He talked him out of it.
I knew.
I was on the
Brother from
fire
another
team
mother, me and Larry. I'm telling
because
you, I'm a Larry.
I'm in the rural district, and I've seen too many corrupt teachers and principals
Exactly.
get switched over.
I'm telling you, because they've got relatives on. I worked in two of them, and the corruption was just it was just overwhelming because they had a cousin on the school board or an uncle or because of their connections, and they just absolutely malpracticed on children every day and got away with it because of who they were. Now that was in less than modern times in the last century when I worked out in those places, and so
Right. And I hate to say
I'm
this,
hoping it has changed now. But you're exactly right, Larry. Out in the rural areas where there's no children's law center to help protect kids that need protecting, it gets ugly sometimes.
and
Really
I hate to say this, but in a district like mine, she would become an assistant superintendent.
Yeah, they say that's rigor, wouldn't they?
Right.
Idiots. Yeah, that's rigor. All right. Excellent job. All right. Who's the next group?
I'm pulling up to share.
Good evening, Liz. You've been awful quiet tonight.
I am awfully sleepy. It has been a week.
Oh, I'm sorry. And here I am talking. I told you to take 2 hours on these tonight, but
I knew that. I had my husband put the kids to bed, so we're
good for
good.
you. Good for you.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can. Well, we could. Now it's gone dark.
I went to present mode. Let's see if it fits.
There it comes. It just
Awesome.
took a minute.
So we are Team 6. I am Liz Shriver, MTSS coach at a primary school in Cabarrus County. We are a small team of 3, but we are mighty and we are ready.
I'm Jasmine. I live in Elizabeth City. I currently sub, but I am elementary education, and I'm floating around doing a bunch of jobs during the day, volunteering, tutoring, intervention, and everything else they can figure out to give me.
Good for you.
And I am Quintina, and I do middle school in Williamsburg County in South Carolina.
Excellent. So we met as a Zoom team and discussed the most important factors in the case, and we were looking at a suspected plagiarism. We negated the fact that sports and his position in the community played a factor in this because due process and everything that we read about said your social status and your connections should not play a role when looking at any sort of disciplinary action or academic action.
Yay.
Was that a good yay?
Yay.
Yay. Okay. Yay.
2 thumbs up.
Yes. So that fact was irrelevant. We talked about the assignment weight was in question and was modified, making the punishment more severe than what was standard policy, and that the final decision should rest with the principal because they are the one responsible for assigning grades, not the superintendent, despite who the connections are.
Yep, that is correct.
So I think most of this was covered by the 2 teams that went before us. Thank you guys for being so thorough, but we looked at due process and the things that factor into that. It's the right of civil liberty, fairness for all citizens, regardless of who you are, where you live, And that it's guaranteed by the amendments. We also touched when we met privately, just the three of us, about double jeopardy, self-incrimination, and that no person should be deprived of these rights. We discussed the differences between those two, substantive due process and procedural due process, making sure that your district follows the state rules and that your school rules follow the state. And if there are federal laws in place, and that they are fair and consistent, and that how you respond to those rules and policies are consistent regardless of who that student is.
Hey, there's your standard right there for due process. Substantive due process, what does the law say you have to do? And then procedural, did you do it?
Did you do it?
That's, I mean, part of the problem we have with some administrators is they don't know what the law is. And they intentionally don't know because they don't want to follow it. It's not that they couldn't find out; they don't want to find out, because if they did, then they'd be responsible to follow it. They want plausible deniability. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. Don't know is not an excuse. Ignorance is not is not an excuse under the law. If your job says you're supposed to know this, just because you said I didn't know it, does not absolve you of the legal liability of knowing what due process is. That's why you got to go out and talk with an AP and observe a due process scenario for discipline, so that you'll know, what is the law, and then you watch your people. Did they follow that, or did they just jerk them up and pound them like like Foghorn Leghorn does on that dog on that cartoon, where he just grabs him up by the tail and wears him out and goes on about his business? Or did they follow the process? Y'all probably aren't old enough to remember those cartoons. I'm gonna have to show one of them cartoon clips about Foghorn wearing the dog out. You can't do that. You're supposed to go through the process. I mean, it's so much easier. Back when I was in school, they just jerk you up and beat the snot out of you, and then going about their business. It was a lot quicker doing discipline back those days. But guess who got the snot beat out of? Whether they were guilty or not. He deserved it. He probably did something else I didn't catch him for. You can't do that, folks. Is the notion here, and those are the standards. So great. I'm glad you put that in writing.
I'll go.
Yep,
I'll go. So we talked a lot about what the principal's course of action should be in this situation. And we started, of course, with the principal has the sole responsibility for assigning those grades, not the superintendent. The principal should refer to first your local school board policy and the student handbook for local policies, the district policy, but including the things that we've learned from this discussion tonight, the referral should have been the very first process coming from the teacher to the principal, and then how that gets handled would have started the process of where the principal was at with this procedure, if it had been done correctly. Yes. So the referral was never given, so a lot of steps were skipped. Therefore, what we kind of have in regards to the very first step kind of goes back to that very first step of the referral. Parents should have been notified along with the student of the claim. That was not done. There was no discussion from from the teacher as well. A lot of the things I've noticed are unfortunately where the teacher lacked, and then where your principal is going to end up having to make up some of that gap. But the parents should have been notified as well. A hearing, from our text that I talked about, a hearing and should happen, all parties involved. The student didn't get a chance to really defend himself. He just kind of admitted to the situation, but there was no process of what to do in that situation. So there was no hearing. And then it says initiate levels setting with grade board policy with a teacher, the grade level school district team structures. Clearly the policy, the grading policy is a problem. 50% you can't do it. So we talked about that. The 10%, more than 10% is usually the rule. So clearly there's some issues with that. Being that is an issue, the principal, that requires a whole separate conversation in itself between the principal and the teacher. Because what we discussed tonight, if it's happened to one student, it's probably happened to more students. And if it's happened in one assignment, who's to say how many assignments it's happened with as well? And why is it happening? Why are we not following school district policies? That's an issue. So knowing the policies, following them in a fair manner, and making sure that all teachers are following the correct grading policies would stop this kind of situation before it even starts. Is it still me or is it?
It's
Me.
Tina's
Oh.
an intro.
Okay. Then we went into the 4 ethical paradigms, which are the justice, care, critique, and profession.
Most of this was already hit by some other folks on the class tonight, but with regard to justice, making sure that when you are putting in place your processes, that it's not random and that it's not unreasonable. Bobby's situation seemed to not be random due to the baseball situation and his connections to the social community, and his uncle's position on the school board. So there may have been ulterior motives with that one. So making sure that any decisions and punishment or discipline is not factored into something being targeted because of someone or an outside factor. And then I'll go back and touch about the unreasonable. We've talked a lot about how 50% of the grade is unreasonable for one assignment, and that this should have been a discipline action and not necessarily an academic consequence.
Agreed. When it comes to care, we talked about in this situation, the principal maintains the relationships with the student, the teacher, the parent, the superintendent, with transparent respect to the school and district policies. That is that's the care that the principal, and then the student is the first responsibility of the principal. We also noted that on page 153, in general, the more severe the punishment, the more formal the due process. The degree of due process that is required is not directly related to the seriousness of the offense, but instead to the seriousness of the consequences being proposed. And because of the severity of the consequences in this situation, that's where we start to have some questions in regards to the due process, because like I asked tonight for clarity, a year out would have been the result of this determination, and that's not reasonable. That consequence is not. It's too severe for the situation. And then we discussed the double jeopardy of being punished twice. That's an issue as well. And then personally, I had to go just a couple questions that is this a first offense, repeat offender? I wanted some more. There were some questions answered about the zero tolerance policy. Is this the standard protocol for cheating and double jeopardy? All those things apply to this situation.
No, the standard is whatever the handbook says. It doesn't say anything about punishing academically. It says it's a disciplinary infraction. Now, go back one slide. I want to make sure I hit on this. Is this the standard protocol for the standard protocol for cheating is outlined in the handbook? It's a disciplinary referral. And so now privately, you need to be asking, is this what she's been doing? Now, you remember last semester when you did the APTEL and we had you go out and do some walkthroughs? Why do you think we have you do walkthroughs as well? And why should administrators make sure that they're doing walkthroughs regularly in teachers' classrooms? Because what we don't want teachers to do is go to the room, close the door, and become warlords and do whatever they want to, that we'll all be responsible for later on. And so if you can get teachers understanding that I may walk in your room at any time, it cuts a lot of this stuff out. But if you let teachers go to the room and close their door and you only see them at the faculty meeting or in the lunchroom every now and then, you don't know what's going on in those rooms. And that's what you better be worried about, is when they close that door, do they understand that door closes? That don't mean that the law closes behind with it, that they still have to follow all the rules and policies, even though they're in the room by themselves. And so, again, the standard in this is you write a referral. That starts due process, period. Anything else is against law and policy.
This one. So critique, we propose to critique the teacher's grading policy. We've discussed that, but clearly the grading policy is not correct. One assignment should not be weighted so heavily as to make a student fail the entire class and for the year and all of that. Considerations, we critique the considerations for the social implications due to the family's community presence and power. That should bear no weight on the decision that the principal makes.
And so when we use these ethical paradigms, we go down the list. Okay, corrupted morals. Yep, that's the teacher in this one. Power. Yep. Critical social class. And human rights. I mean, that's you work through these steps. Is this a case of those things? So I said they don't all apply every time, but when you're looking at ethical paradigms, I put the big buzzwords up. Check those off. If this is not corrupted moral, I mean, when you're looking at, is this ethical or not? Under critique, is this corrupted morals? Absolutely. So then this is a violation of ethical concern. Then, if you can check all those things and say no, it wasn't a violation of any of these, then you're good on that paradigm of ethical behavior. But you got to look at all four of them, and you got to look at all the bullets under each one of them to say, yep, you're clean on the ethical behavior part. And pardon my metaphor here, but ethics is like pregnancy. Either you are or you aren't. There's no little bit or maybe or here sometime. It's binary, yes or no. You meet all bullets and all standards, all four of the ethical paradigms, or ethics aren't in place. It can't be, well, they met some of them but not all. Well, then you didn't. Then it's not an ethical response. Then ethics is all or nothing. Okay.
Profession. Professionally, the principals have the final say on grades, meaning the superintendent cannot legally override a principal decision nor matter their influence when it comes to grades. If you go by each step, you said accountability for the student academic and social success. One, it does play a role with the teacher because she did not take in consideration of the student academic success at all. So that's why if we had followed the due process, or the school or the teacher had followed the due process, they would have went through that profession and noticed that they did not do it at all. They did not give a referral and have a parent-teacher conference to discuss where the student went wrong at.
Right.
So those wasn't followed. And safeguarding the value and democracy, I don't know if that plays a role in that.
Well, in a case like this, probably not. But the next one is a fail.
Yeah, to evaluate
moral and legal consequences. I mean, fails on that one. Fails on social justice.
Not reflective practice either, or transparent, because there was no
exactly right.
with the parents or any of that. So
yeah. So these are the standards that you put a decision through on ethics. You have to go through each bullet.
Okay.
And if it fails on any of them, then they failed the ethic of profession. If they fail any of the four ethics, then it's a fail on the ethical concern.
And then to round us out, that last one, best interest of students, clearly it was not. It was not in the best interest of students, because at the end of the day, what lesson was learned? Where did you go? How did we bridge that gap to make sure that the learning still occurred for the assignment? That, I mean, I know we're trying to move from teacher thinking to administrative thinking, but in my heart, I still have to go back to, as a teacher, I want to make sure you understood the assignment, and clearly just putting an F on your paper and counting you out for plagiarism is not going to make sure.
But he never said he didn't understand the assignment. I think it was just affecting time and doing it.
Yeah.
Of course, we didn't measure mastery then. So but that's neither here nor there, but we never measure mastery.
I mean, the reason that you made the assignment is kids were supposed to get some learning from it. And just giving a 0 or doing something like this, then obviously
Right.
you're not concerned. I mean, if it was worth assigning, it was worth to make sure that the kid had mastered whatever you intended for him to do. That's the ethic of profession as well. So the reason why that I harp on you about making sure we do the legal first and then the ethical is when you go to court, the ethical piece is the part they're going to get you on for monetary tort liability. Yeah, if you showed intent to harm, and that's ethical violation shows intent to harm, that's when they're going to wear you out financially. So you got to understand that they're going to put you through both of these litmus tests when you get sued and you go to court or there's a hearing. They'll determine whether you broke the law or not, but they'll use the ethics. They'll use the ethical paradigms to try to adjudicate whether you intended to harm or not. And if again, that's why you got to be concerned about this, and you got to work through this ethical paradigm when you start making decisions, because you not only have to be concerned about the legal or illegal part, but you got to be concerned that if you do something unethical, that shows intent to harm. That won't go well for you. So that's why you got to put every case through the legal part and the ethical piece, because that's what they're going to do to you if you have to go to court. We had a question, a hand raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna have you ever been to court?
I beg your pardon?
Have you ever been to court? Have you ever?
1,000 times.
Say that a million times.
1,000 times, probably. I used to have to go for the district. I was the one that had to go. One of my roles in the central office, I was the one that had to go. I never had to go as a principal, luckily. Probably should have, but I didn't have to go as a principal. But yes, I've been a dozen times, or a dozen, more, 100 times. Mostly over EC. A lot of these kinds of things, yes. In Charlotte, you go all the time. You're in court every week. You're in juvenile court every week. Something. Children's Law Center's got you hauled up for doing something about it every week. Yeah. And they don't talk very kindly to you in court either. So, sometimes the judges, Lou Trosh was terrible. He hated CMS. He used to say awful things, and sometimes we deserved it. But yes, I've been many, many times. The only good thing about going to court was it was on 4th Street and I could walk out the back of the Ed Center, didn't have to move my car and find a parking place. I just walk over to court every week. Regular as rain. I had a path wore out through the park, Marshall Park, going through the back way over to 4th Street to the Ed, over to the court. Yep. I got where I stayed over there about as much as I did the Ed Center. I ate lunch over there, had a lunchroom. Yeah. In a large district, yeah, it's taking court all the time over people doing stupid things. Let me share my screen quickly and we'll get to our last group. I hope that I have it in it. Let me see. Let me see. Right here under 3, make sure you check out this liability lawsuit. That's a recent case that I was just talking about. Let me see. Right here. Even if you assign to an alternative program or like summer school, it still fits that federal designation as an expulsion, zero tolerance. So that does not mitigate, again, as I said earlier, because they said, well, we'll let Bobby go to summer school. That still doesn't mitigate that you violated federal zero tolerance law. It says so right here in the law. So you can't say, well, because we gave him an alternative to setting out a whole year, that means that we didn't break the federal law on zero tolerance expulsions. Yes, you did. It says so right here. It says so in the law. So that you said, well, he can go to summer school for 6 weeks, which is an alternative placement, or to alternative school for 6. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. It still meets the criteria for a violation of federal law by putting the kid out for a whole year without due process. All right, last group. Let's get rolling.
Okay, can you see my screen?
I can.
Perfect. Okay, so my name is Carolina Bennett, and I am a self-contained special education teacher. Now we call it comprehensive skills teacher in Caldwell County, North Carolina. And then I'll let Adam introduce himself.
I am Adam Caratudo. I am a high school English teacher in Saluda County, South Carolina.
Okay.
So we've kind of hit the bullet points between all the other groups, but we just kind of did a summary of case study 1. So Bobby turned in his older brother's assignment from 2 years ago to the same teacher, Miss Jane Barton. He admitted that he plagiarized the assignment because he was too busy with the school's baseball team. Project counted for more than half of his final grade, so Bobby's failure meant that he would be required to attend summer school, meaning that Bobby would not, hold on, I think that's the last word on that side, yeah, all that part, would not participate in the summer baseball tournament, which helps kids get scholarships in schools. Ms. Barton expected the principal to uphold the school policy within the student handbook on cheating.
Let me stop you right there. Sorry, Adam.
You're good.
This is where I said you as an administrator have to know the policy didn't say that he could fail for the year. He could fail the assignment. And that's only if he didn't do whatever the restitution was. You have to know that no policy can say that you automatically fail for the year, because that would violate federal law. Now the teacher doesn't know that, but you need to explain that to your teachers so that they understand. That's part of that going over the handbook deal with them. But you have to know that federal law says you can't put a policy in that says a kid can, if he does this, he fails for the year. He gets no due process. It may be arbitrary. It may be capricious. So that's the part why I don't ever change that is that you're supposed to know as an administrator versus a teacher that it can't mean for the year, because it would be a violation of federal law. That's part of the learning process of these things. Your knowledge base has to increase, and you have to make sure teachers understand that as well. All right, excuse me, Adam, go right ahead.
Where was I? When Ms. Barton expected the principal to uphold the school policy within the student handbook on cheating. And the superintendent ultimately left the principal in charge of deciding Bobby's outcome.
Because it's his legal responsibility to do that. That is correct.
Okay, so a lot of the groups have already touched on these, but we have this substantive due process. In Bobby's case, the school policy states to maintain personal honesty, cheating of any kind may require a failing grade by the teacher. We made note that in our school law textbook, there is a little caveat that says the word may leaves the final decision open to the school administrator, where the words shall and will require the administrator to follow the policy exactly how it's written. And so in Bobby's case, let's see, where was it? Project's worth more than half of his final grade. We talked about that. In procedural, we said that administration had the reservations because of the stakeholders being on the baseball team and the Board of Education, but we've already determined that that holds no credibility in the due process.
So we have, arbitrary and capricious. Arbitrary being a decision is arbitrary if it comes about seemingly at random or by chance. Considered arbitrary if choices made without any specific criterion. I made a note earlier when we were a couple groups ago. I've been taking notes with it coming down to that nasty word discretion that we talked about, and how it ultimately was not being right, but the teacher had the discretion to, oh, you know what, this is the grade that I'm going to give them. This is the weight. And then with capricious, the decision is capricious if it is the product of a sudden, impulsive, and seemingly unmotivated notion or action. It could also be considered as unpredictable. I think my notes are all kind of jumbled when I was writing them. But in this point, with the teacher with ulterior motives, I made a note that I know it's not a thing, but triple jeopardy.
You're
Harming,
right. You are right. That's a good catch. You're exactly right.
Because not only if it is an ulterior motive because of the nepotism in the community and with his uncle and the fact that he's the star on the baseball team, you have not only is that you're not allowed to harm them academically and disciplinarily, I'm guessing, but they're also going after them personally. So it's that triad, it's that triple jeopardy.
Yeah, it's exactly right. You're trying to harm them socially as well. And that's part of that ethical paradigm. That's, so yeah, going after him, 3 ways here, folks. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, can you imagine the negative impact if the media got a hold of you trying to pull a stunt like this in today's media environment? Oh, you'd be crucified.
Okay, so in Bobby's case, we've talked about a lot of this, but one failing grade caused Bobby to fail the entire class. There were no written guidelines regarding how much a single assessment can weigh on a final class.
And you have to know that. Again, that's part of the learning in this class is you have to understand that the state Board of Education sets the overall policy on grading, and then the local adopts or adapts to that. And you've got one in your district, and it's in your handbook. So yes, there is a guideline regarding how much a single, in aggregate, they can only count 10%. Now, the question is how many do you have for the year? And that's one of the things as a principal that you need to be very cognizant of is that, we don't need these major assignments that like carrying around a flower baby like they used to do in middle school back 40 years ago. Something that stupid could count 10% of a kid's grade. There needs to be more than one assignment. You need to be doing that, but in aggregate. So yes, there are guidelines on, final exam can only count 30. In South Carolina, where Adam is, SC Ready testing, they have quarterlies that go along with that. And the quarterlies count 10 and the final counts 20. In North Carolina, the final counts 30. And then out of class 10, homework 10, in-class tests and assignments count 50. And it's 30-20 on that. And the local sets specifically the 30 to 20. And a lot of times they'll say how many there has to be, so that one can't be 10. Just one out of class. And so, but yes, there are policies, but no policy says that one out of class or one homework, whichever way, you can count more than 50. That is a violation of state law. It says that in aggregate you can only count 10.
Then we had made note that Bobby's uncle had provided outside influence on the overall decision, or he tried to anyway. Being a spoken member of the Board of Education and a sponsor of the baseball team. And then we talked about the bottom one already, that the superintendent did what he was supposed to do. When we read it, we kind of saw that it just seems like he just said, well, just be careful. But you said,
that's the only advice he can give.
Yeah. Yes, we just ignore the bottom one.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the 4 ethical paradigms. I'm gonna let Adam do these 2.
Okay, so with justice, we have fairness and equity and justice, but fairness and equity are bolded because in this case, it's not fair.
Yeah.
We have the whole equity thing. It's not in the child's best interest. It's not
Right.
across the board. As far as we know, Bobby's the only one that is getting, attacked on this one. But like we said earlier, how many other students in the past has this teacher done this to? So in Bobby's case, as far as we know, Bobby has never plagiarized an assignment before. Is it fair to fail the whole class from one assignment? No, absolutely not. Are other students allowed to redo assignments when caught cheating? So is this, again, I don't necessarily want to say a personal vendetta, but like
it is
ulterior motives there. And is the school policy fair as written? And then with care, loyalty, trust, concern, connection, relationship. And we've talked about all of this in the other groups. Bobby's case, what are Bobby's other grades like? Does he have any other discipline referrals? Granted, when it comes down to it, it shouldn't still, one failing grade should not have you fail for the whole year or fail the whole class based on one assignment. Is the concern more for Bobby's consequence or for the stakeholders' influence? So that goes back to the whole ulterior motive, the whole, is it, are we gonna let the influence get to us, or are we gonna follow the, policy? And should the school policy include specific details regarding plagiarism consequences? So this is kind of what we do in Saluda. First offense, redo the assignment with a chance to replace the failing grade and make a parent contact. Second offense, parent conference. Third, lunch detention, something like that. I am realizing, though, as we talked and things that I've learned tonight, things are not entirely being done correctly.
Yeah, you need to do a referral.
Yeah,
and then put, as long as you do a referral and then you do these things, you're fine.
Yeah.
But not doing a referral means there's an absence of due process, and if the kid doesn't follow through with one of these things here, then you're kind of you're in trouble if you didn't due process the kid from the very beginning to try to find out why he did it and give him an opportunity to rebut it or whatever, or present witnesses. And then if you find a finding that, yeah, he's guilty of cheating or plagiarism, then you can put these in place. Absolutely, you can do that. But you don't want frontier justice where teachers closing that door and just wearing them out, doing whatever they want to. It just looks bad. The optics are bad on them. And you don't know whether they followed due process or not, or and not knowing is not an excuse under the eyes of the law. You're supposed to know.
Yeah.
And you can have good teachers who have the best interest of kids at heart, but if you didn't follow due process, you're exposing yourself to that parent that comes along and gets after you. And as long as I'm not saying that you should redo what you're doing at Saluda. That looks really good to me, but make sure that there's a written referral, that there's an administrator that has adjudicated it, that, yeah, this kid did that. But before you start enacting the consequences, because basically the kid's not had his day in court. He's got to get his day in court first before you start his consequences. Brandon, you got a question?
Yes, it's kind of off topic, but so when teachers just send kids out of the classrooms without
that's awful.
Without a referral, so you know how like you got behavior problem, they send them to the office and they're sitting. So if they don't put in a referral, they're skipping the whole due process
That's
procedure.
correct.
And that's illegal.
You got to write a referral.
Because
That's what starts the process.
at my school, a lot of teachers just send kids out of the room, no referral,
And
and
if
they're
something
sitting in the
happens to that
office.
kid, if somebody comes in and shoots them because they're sitting outside the room, or the kid gets in the car with another kid and leaves, they're on the hook. You got to explain that to teachers is in loco parentis. That kid's in the room with you. You can't just be sending them out. You can write a referral and have somebody come and get them, but don't send them out till somebody comes and gets them. They're to stay with you until somebody comes and gets them. Otherwise, we don't have adequate, you have not provided adequate supervision of that child.
So did that fall on the teacher or did that fall on the principal?
Teacher.
Okay.
Falls on the teacher. And it falls on the principal if they let them do that and don't follow up and tell them to quit it. You know, it becomes negligence on your part as an administrator if you're allowing teachers to do that. It's known that they're doing that and you're not doing anything to stop that. That's negligence on your part. You had a duty to act and you didn't. You know, that child is now in harm and you've not acted. That would be nonfeasance. You had a duty to act and didn't. You got to stop teachers from sending them out of the room. Only time a kid leaves the room is with an escort, period, and a referral, period. That covers you legally. If not, you're hanging out in the wind.
You want me to keep going now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the other ethical paradigms are critique and profession. We've talked about corrupt morals and power. In Bobby's case, we feel like the stakeholders of the baseball team and the Board of Education tried to hold a heavy influence over Bobby's consequences. Is that the same for all students? No. And then we also said, how is the teacher going to feel if the principal doesn't have any consequences? So Bobby still needs to have some kind of consequence, but it needs to be an appropriate consequence.
Yeah, appropriate. I mean, you need to follow the handbook, and it says that these are the steps that you take on a referral for the kid. But you know, that goes back to that capricious part is I mean, you know, some teachers wouldn't be satisfied unless you just shot Bobby graveyard dead, but that's not appropriate.
Right.
You know, that's the thing. We don't do discipline to please teachers. We got to get out of that notion. We don't run school for the convenience of teachers or what they want or don't want. We run it for children and for their academic growth and social development. And so we can't be caught up in what will please teachers or displease teachers. That's a fool's errand trying to chase their approval. That'll never happen. Because again, some of them, nothing you do short of shooting a kid will make them happy. That can't be part of the paradigm. The paradigm has to be, did we follow due process? And did we follow the ethical paradigm along with what was legal in policy? You know, what does the handbook say that we do when a kid cheats? I showed you the one from Charlotte Mecklenburg. These are the steps that you take. Anything outside of that, you're in trouble.
Okay. Under profession, we talked about the principal's duty to have accountability and to have the best interests of students. In Bobby's case, what consequence would be considered appropriate for his action? How is the principal going to handle changing the policy in the student handbook if he sees fit? And then how will the principal handle applying a consequence to a student with an influential stakeholder as a family member? And the answer to that one is it should be the same.
Let me stop you there. The principal can't change the handbook. Policy set by the Board of Education. The parameters are set by the State Board of Education. Your local board adopts a code of conduct, the policy for code of conduct, and sets the consequences. Principal cannot change or modify that. That is if we went back, and we will in a minute. We'll go back. We'll show you who the code of conduct belongs to. All right, continue.
So in this specific case study, in just the 2 pages that we had, it didn't specifically have like what the grading should be, like you're talking about.
You're supposed to know. You're supposed to know.
Okay.
You're again. You're supposed to know what the state board is, and you're supposed to know what your local is. You would apply again. You apply the state that you're in, the policies and laws of the state, and the individual policies of your school to these cases, and you're supposed to know what that is.
Okay. So for the principal's course of action, some of this we will change, but review the student handbook, ask teachers for feedback for this one. I don't really think teacher feedback is necessary if you are the
No.
one that has.
And you can't, there's no need to review the student handbook. You don't get to
Right.
change it. It's not yours.
Yeah. I would continue to monitor rates of behavior referrals for cheating, especially if you decide to keep that teacher, monitor their referrals. We can't do anything about a grading policy because you said that's district. So this one is, you have to set up a due process hearing, but in this case, you can't because there's no referral. You've already
Right.
dropped the ball from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
So ideally, have a referral and then have a due process hearing.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Carry out the disciplinary action that was mandated in the due process hearing and make sure that you file all of your proper paperwork. Then we have for Bobby, he should be given an opportunity to redo his project. He will receive a lowered grade, which I think would be like if he turned it in late, it wouldn't be lowered because he cheated, but it would be turned in late. And then not weighted for more than half of his class grade.
Yeah, it can't be that much. We just got to remind them, we have a grading policy. It's in your faculty handbook. It was adopted by the school board from the parameters from the state school board. You must follow that. You don't get to go rogue and do what you want to do. You know, it has to be consistent. And you could have a faculty meeting, but we're not changing the policy. We're not allowed to. But we would cover the grading policy again. Now, I suggest you're required to do it once a year in August, in that required work day. I've always suggested that mid-year you do it again because of staff turnover, substitutes, and just to remind people that twice a year, to cover yourself as a principal, I would go over the student handbook of everything that's in it in terms of code of conduct, grading policy, all those things to make sure kid cuts up, don't send him out of the room, write a referral, call somebody to come and get him. Make sure that you're following. That's the first step in due process. Without that referral, we've not given him due process. That you have to do that. And the disciplinary data manual shows all this stuff, all these infractions. It doesn't matter what you're going to do. The state doesn't care, but you have to document all these things that happen in your school with a referral. And that referral has to go into the database.
We put some further considerations, just because this one I had questions about. So Bobby was not given a due process hearing because
he didn't get a referral and go down and sit with the AP and him process his case.
Yeah.
Why do you think we call it? Excuse me. Why do you think we call it processing discipline? Because it's due process. That's what processing discipline is. It isn't just having them come in and wear them out like foghorn leghorn. There's a process that we go through. What is the substance that we're supposed to go through? And then procedurally, did we follow all those steps that we were legally required to? But you're right, Bobby was not given a due process here. No referral was written. He didn't go down to the assistant principal's office and present his case, witnesses, any of that stuff. We completely skipped the whole due process on Bobby.
Yeah, my question with this one, and it's also kind of a worry, is his situation is cheating, is the cheating situation. But then we also have he won't be able to play baseball if he has to do summer.
Yeah.
And Siemens v. Snow and Hebert v. Ventuolo, in the textbook, it mentions that in both of those cases, held that no due process hearing is required for denial of placement in extracurricular programs.
Yeah, just getting to be involved in them, but not in a case like this. This is an exclusion.
Okay.
So yeah, you don't have to have a due process to get excluded from those. From extracurriculars. There's no property right to extracurricular activity. There is the free and appropriate FAPE, free and appropriate public education. There is a property right to that. There is not to playing ball. That is correct. That's why I said that is not part of this case.
Okay, that was just we said at the beginning with all that information being thrown in.
Yeah, that's just to confuse you. Again, there's no property right to playing ball or being a cheerleader.
Okay.
That
And the second
is the
one,
free and appropriate public education.
did Ms. Barton supply Bobby's brother's assignment as evidence of plagiarism, or was it hearsay?
Yeah, that would be would come out. Exactly. That's a good point. That's a great point, Adam. During due process, the school would have to produce that. That's part of due process. You would have to produce the evidence. That is exactly right. That is part of the due process where the school has the burden of proof to prove the case, and that would be the main piece of evidence. That's exactly right. It's a good point. You would
But
have
she chose to be the judge and the jury, so
and
she didn't supply it.
That's correct. That's exactly right. You can't do that. That's also against the rules, and as we'll find out later this semester when we cover the sexual stuff on Title IX, there's new law in Title IX says the person that investigates can't be the one that gives the punishment anymore either. Like in most cases, the assistant principal processes the case, collects the evidence and then assigns the consequence. In Title IX cases and sex cases, you can't even do that anymore. That came in 2020 during the pandemic, and a lot of people missed it. But you got to be careful on those Title IX cases. If you're the AP that investigates it, you better let the principal assign the consequence. That's a new. They've even gone a step further on Title IX cases to make sure that you're not judge, jury, and executioner. Now, on a regular disciplinary case, you can be the one that investigates and assigns the consequence as an assistant principal. Yes, but not Title IX cases. Anything has to do with sex, gender, equity, access, any of those, harassment, sexual assault, sexual offense, any of those, you can't be the one. And so one of the things that's kind of gotten a little bit dicey at the university level is the normal person who would do that would be the dean of students, now is having to draft professors in to conduct investigations so she can levy the punishment. One of our colleagues in the College of Ed that's next door to me, my work partner, he's having to do one right now so that she won't be the one that investigates and gives the punishment, because she's the one that gives the punishment. That makes things a little bit tricky as well. But the thing about schools is you have an administrative team. So you got to divide those responsibilities up. That's a good point. That's making it a little more difficult in those sexual cases. But that's the new law. You got to follow it. All right.
Oh, we got.
Excellent job, everybody, tonight. Thank you all. I will quickly share my screen and show you if I can, and again, indulge me.
I have one quick question.
Yes, while I can answer those while we're doing this.
Well, do we have to go in and change anything, or we just leave the
That's
PowerPoint?
what was according to what you want to do. Remember, I am going to grade you based on the content of your. And so if you didn't get it right, I believe I'd go in and change it.
Okay, because I already submitted it, so we can take that out
I
and
allow
resubmit.
multiple submissions.
Okay, very
You can
good.
go
Thank
in
you.
and just override. All you got to do is upload it, and the last one will come up for the grade.
Very good.
All right. So let me do this right quick. So this is how discipline used to work right here. But we can't do this. I don't think it'll have any sound for y'all. We don't need sound. Y'all see that? So So the notion here of the little cartoon, and that's the metaphor that I use. Used to, I mean, you could just jerk a kid up and just pound them. I mean, literally, when I was in school, they just jerk you up and pound you. We've gone from that, where kids had zero rights in school, nothing. 1969, due process has come in, and it has evolved over the years, more and more restrictive for the protection of children, to make sure that we're treating them appropriately in school. Due process, people look at, oh, gosh, it makes process and discipline take forever. Well, then it needs to take forever if we get it right, and we protect the rights of that child. You know, they're precious cargo, folks. We can really harm children, both academically and socially. And we know kids that don't finish high school, that flunk out of school, that get put out of school for disciplinary reasons, generally end up in prison. And kids that don't finish school, that they have a tough road to hoe economically the rest of their life. And so the notion is due process is important. You need to know the law, and you need to make sure that you slow down. You work toward restorative justice rather than just punishment. You can't just jerk them up and pound them anymore, either literally or figuratively. That we have due process since '69. So that's kind of the bottom line on tonight's case. Y'all did an excellent job. I appreciate your time and attention. Maybe, you know, generally they go faster during the semester. Sometimes we finish a good bit faster than this, but we have to make sure that these cases, you understand, they are going to have things in there to throw you off. There are certain things that you must know. It won't tell you that there is a grading policy and this violates it. You have to know that there's a policy out there. You have to know, when we get to the Leandro case, you have to know that the Leandro plaintiffs lost the case. And not only will the state not differentiate money, you can't differentiate it at the local level either. You have to know that by having read and understood Leandro. So next week, we'll talk about our next case study. Y'all are all doing really well in your work. Make sure that you read the task and prompts completely. Don't leave out a prompt. Like again, OMA Task 3 has 2 prompts. Make sure you hit both of them. And I will see you all next week. Give yourself a hand. You did a great job tonight. I appreciate you. Have a good evening.